Hi everybody, I hope you're doing well today. Dr. Shook here. In this video, what I'm going to teach you is another one of the patterns that I commonly see in practice that causes hypothyroid symptoms, low thyroid symptoms, even though TSH and a lot of the labs look normal. So it can be very misleading. If you're going to your doctor and they're checking your thyroid, many times they just screen by looking at TSH, which is produced by your pituitary gland, and it doesn't tell the whole story of the physiology and where it can break down. So what I'm going to share with you is one of the common patterns that I'll see in practice, and what we're going to do, we'll start with how it works, right? How the body makes your thyroid hormone, and then I'll kind of explain what's breaking down with the physiology. I'll talk about some of the lab values that you'll see, and then behind me here I'll talk about a lot of the potential causes and reasons that we end up with this type of pattern, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. This entire process of thyroid hormone production begins in the brain. Remember, there's a central structure in the brain called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus makes thyroid-releasing hormone, which is a hormone that stimulates the pituitary, the pituitary gland is another brain structure right behind between your eyes, right behind your skull here. Pituitary makes thyroid-stimulating hormone. The thyroid-stimulating hormone, or TSH, stimulates the thyroid to ramp up its production of T4 and T3, the primary thyroid hormones. Okay, I'm simplifying it. There's a lot of stuff here that I could go into detail, but I'm trying to give you concepts and not the minute details of the biochemistry. Okay, so the thyroid stimulating hormone, the TSH, is typically what doctors check to screen for thyroid dysfunction. Okay, if TSH is normal, then they reason that everything else is fine, and at least that the quantities are fine. Right? There are some other things where this physiology can break down, and that's what we're going to talk about. So to this point, if everything's working normally, your body will make T4 and T3. Okay? Now, this can still happen. A lot of these patterns that I talk about, when we talk about quantities, let's say that your thyroid, none of these patterns, you see that a lot of times these patterns that I'm discussing and teaching you guys, there's not just one thing happening to you. You might have this pattern, plus you have Hashimoto's, which is destroying the gland, which makes you unable to produce these hormones. So you're like, well, what do I do then? Well, you should be taking a thyroid hormone that's replacing it. So what happens is if you're taking a thyroid hormone that's replacing your T4 and T3, as long as the quantity's right, then we just carry on with the physiology the same way, right? I mean, if you're taking a replacement hormone, this pattern can still occur. If you don't have a thyroid and you're taking hormones, this pattern can still occur because the hormones that you're taking, what I'm getting ready to talk about, can still happen to them, right? Because quantity is one thing. The ability to take these hormones, convert them into the proper forms, transport them to the cells where they're needed and used is another thing, all right? So that's what we're going to talk about in this particular pattern, which I don't even think I introduced it today. This is thyroid binding globulin elevations. Increased, basically, you'll see me note it as increased, or an arrow up, TBG, thyroid binding globulin. So that's how it's going to look. So this pattern is all about an increase in these binding globulins, which are little carrier proteins that carry the thyroid hormone through the bloodstream and then drop them off where they're ready to be used at the cell. Okay, so up to this point, we've talked about the thyroid hormone quantities are here. The T4, remember, is the primary hormone made. It's 93% of the output by the gland. T3 is about 7% of the output by the gland. T3 is the physiologically active hormone that stimulates the cells and gives us the benefits that we want. Now, T4 is primarily inactive, and it has to be converted. Most of it's converted in the liver from T4 to T3, and then the T3 is put back into the bloodstream. Okay. Now, the conversion does happen in other places like the GI tract, where you have to have good bacteria, good stomach acidity, and good intestinal sulfatase for this conversion to occur. It does happen in some other peripheral tissues like the heart, for example. But the majority of this T4 is going to be converted here in the liver from T4 to T3. Now, once you have T3, it's put back into the bloodstream. Now, once it gets into the bloodstream, these little blue thyroid binding globulins, which is exactly what we're talking about. The whole story revolves around all these blue guys today, okay? All these little blue things that I've drawn here, okay? They represent these binding globulins. What they do, when the T3 gets into the bloodstream, the T3 is free. It's considered free-floating hormone until it's bound to a protein, okay? So when it gets into the bloodstream, it's bound to the protein. The protein carries it through the bloodstream, carries the T3 through the bloodstream, and then drops it off at the cell. When it drops it off, it becomes, you notice I have this as a tiny f, free T3, and the T3 is free. It's no longer bound to the protein, so it's free, and it's available for the cell to attach to the receptors on the cell and stimulate the cellular metabolism. Basically, what we call a proteomic response drives all the cellular metabolism. So in this pattern, what happens when you have an elevated thyroid binding globulin number, or you have more of these thyroid binding globulins than you need, there's all of the T3 that's put out, not all of it, but a lot of it is bound to these little carrier proteins because there's too many of them. And let's talk about that. Like, why are there too many of these in this particular pattern? Let's go to the causes, okay? So what causes you to have too many of these little proteins that hold on to the majority of the T3, making it, keeping it bound so that it's not available for the cell, resulting in feeling hypothyroid, is most common things: oral contraceptives and estrogen replacement therapy. Basically, increased estrogens increase these thyroid binding globulins. And so when you have increase in these thyroid binding globulins, there's just not enough hormone free floating for the cells to use to drive cellular metabolism, so you feel hypothyroid. And what you'll see here is what you typically see in this pattern is that if you look at labs, TSH would be normal. Total T4, so this number is normal. And what you're going to see is usually the total hormone numbers are going to look normal. So like total T4, total T3. Now the total hormones, keep in mind what the difference in total T4 and free T4 is just that the total T4 adds all the free floating free T4 and the T4 that's bound to proteins together. Okay, just what you really look at on this pattern is you'll see that TSH is normal, T4 is typically normal, T3 uptake, so the ability of the body to uptake and use all the T3 in circulation, is low or near the low end of the range, okay? Near low or low. And you'll see that basically there's so many of those little binding proteins that just holds onto all the thyroid hormone, not making it available to the cell. So you feel like you have hypothyroidism, though your TSH looks normal and T4 looks normal. But the T3 uptake, which is almost never ran that I see, is low. And then if you check the free hormones, so if you check free T3 and free T4, so if we look at our diagram here, the hormone, the T3 that's bound to the protein is the majority of the hormone, right? And there's not much that's free. There's only like just 2 here in my diagram that are free. So there's not enough free. You'll see that the free hormone is low and the free T4 is low. Typically, that's what it will look like. The total T4, total T3 will be normal. The free hormones will be low because there's not many of those, okay? And T3 uptake will tend to be low because you're not able to uptake and use the hormone that's in circulation. So this is a really important pattern to understand. This is super common in women that are taking oral contraceptives, women that are using estrogen replacement therapy, in creams. Creams or oral replacement is very, very common. So this is a common pattern. So we have to address the estrogens. Now, one thing that's really important here to understand is you got to address the estrogens. Typically, we look to see, well, are the estrogens essential, right? Do you have to have those? Why are you taking them? And then you have to ask that question, because if they're causing you to have all these problems, is that a sufficient trade-off for you? Are you willing to feel the way you're feeling if the estrogens are causing the problem? So you have to have that conversation. And then what we typically do is we support liver function to help biotransform and break down these excessive estrogens out of the body so that these binding proteins here can normalize in number. Now, one of the potential problems with increased estrogens is, increased estrogen levels are not good. They are excessive estrogen in the body. You can actually convert some of these things to very dangerous forms of estrogen, like 16-hydroxy. It's a hydroxylated form. 16-hydroxyestrogen is associated with tissue proliferation and growth. I've seen it higher in numerous cases where a woman's had a history of or has endometriosis or a lot of cyst formation. They have higher levels of 16-hydroxyestrogen. I've seen that association. it can also, your body can make 4-hydroxyestrogens. And really, your body makes all these forms, 16-hydroxy, 4-hydroxyestrogen, 2-hydroxyestrogen. It makes them all. It's just, are they in normal ratios, normal amounts? So when you see an overproduction of 16-hydroxy, you start worrying about like tissue growth. Like, I've seen it associated more with endometriosis and cyst formation. The other thing is the 4-hydroxyestrogens. If you have high 4-hydroxyestrogens, we know that those are carcinogenic, that they damage DNA, and that they can promote cancers. So are these estrogens causing this problem? But what else are they causing? Right? Are you forming these dangerous metabolites? If so, you need to know that. And you need to know that there are some things that we can do to support it nutritionally to help support shifting of those metabolites like the 16-hydroxy, the 4-hydroxyestrogens into a safer form. But you have to address the estrogens, and you have to look at the whole picture and see what's going on here. This is a really common pattern. I've seen it a lot, and quite frankly, you see a lot of these patterns overlapping. It's not just always clear one way or the other. It's not. There's usually a few things that are happening at once, at minimum, if not several things happening at once. So it's good to I want to share this with you guys, especially women that are using contraceptives or hormone replacement therapy. This is so important for you to understand. And then to also kind of understand what you might see on labs, because a lot of times your doctors aren't going to understand this, and not because they're not capable. They're very capable. They just, they may not be exposed to it. It may not fit into their practice, their model of practice. And you got to realize your doctors, they are trying to help you so much. I don't know anyone that got into any type of healthcare or medicine that didn't want to help people. This is just something that, under a typical insurance-based model, it becomes very, very challenging to practice for a lot of people because you don't have a lot of time to dig into this. But at the same time, that's why I'm teaching it, because you guys need to be empowered with information so that you can be your own advocate and you can, think for yourself and be an active participant in your healthcare and not just a bystander, right? You need to be able to ask questions and think for yourself. So thank goodness for the internet, I think. There's a lot of caveats to the internet. There's a lot of potential problems. But anyway, this is a very common pattern that I see. I want to share this with you guys, especially if you're a woman. Oral contraceptives, estrogen replacement therapy can create way too many of these binding globulins that can hold on to all the thyroid hormone, not making enough available for the cell, making you feel hypothyroid. In addition, these estrogens can cause a dominance of very dangerous estrogen metabolites that can lead to tissue proliferation or even cancers. And these are things that we can check. We can check those metabolites, by the way, the 16-hydroxy, the 4-hydroxy, the 2-hydroxyestrogens, to see how you're metabolizing and breaking down estrogens. Those are typically, as far as I know, they have to be done via a urinary test. They're not available in a serum. So just want to share that with you guys. I appreciate you so much. Please, please share this as much as you can. There's so many people, millions and millions of people that are suffering that have no idea how to help themselves, no idea. They think, well, my thyroid's normal. Well, if TSH is all that's checked, that's not a very thorough investigation, but I will tell you that is considered the standard of care. So it's not that your doctors are being negligent or anything like that. It is just, it's the model of healthcare that we're in right now. Believe me, your doctors are frustrated too. They're trying to help you. So please don't go to them with, as an adversary, right? Don't do that. They're trying to help you. Just empower yourself. Okay, I appreciate you guys so much. Please do let me know if you have any questions. Post comments below, and we'll do our best to get back to you. But I appreciate you so much. Hope you have a wonderful day.